Why would a ruthless mafia boss force a waitress to be his fake wife? Because she actively hates him. Dante Moretti could have hired any actress or model, but he specifically chose Evelyn because of the pure terror and desperation in her eyes. He needs the world to believe he's in love. But in reality, he brought her to his maximum security estate as bait to flush out a traitor.
The brutal crack of a slap just shattered the fancy quiet of the Obsidian Club, cutting the soft jazz dead. Picture this. A young waitress stands totally frozen, a nasty red handprint already blowing up on her cheek. Over her is Vanessa Thorne, a rich girl whose bank account erased her decency years ago. But honestly, the room wasn't even looking at her. Every single eye was locked on Dante Moretti, the mafia boss famous for making rivals vanish under wet concrete. You and I know that heavy, choking feeling right before a storm ruins everything, right? But here is the crazy twist. When Dante finally stood up, he didn't even reach for a gun. It leaves us with a pretty grim life lesson. True, terrifying power rarely needs a weapon to force the entire world to its knees. Let us rewind a second and look at the poor girl stuck in the middle of this absolute nightmare. Evelyn Vance nervously pulled at her cheap uniform collar, her tiny frame literally shaking from working too many shifts. It wasn't even 8 at night, and she was running on empty. Next to her, the floor manager was sweating bullets through his overpriced suit, hissing a frantic warning about Table 4. The Moretti family just walked in. Now, life teaches us a harsh truth here. Sometimes surviving just means learning exactly who you need to be terrified of. Evelyn felt her stomach drop as a freezing wave of pure panic hit her blood. In this corrupt city, nobody even needed to watch the news to know the violent shadow Dante Moretti dragged across the streets. This mob syndicate ran the entire city from the shadows, and Dante was the guy pulling the bloody strings. Evelyn forced herself to swallow the massive lump of panic in her throat. Honestly, she had 0 options left. Her little brother was set for a life-saving surgery in exactly 1 week. It reminds us of a really bitter reality check. Sometimes the most brutal hits we take in life are the ones we gladly eat just to keep our loved ones breathing. Gripping a silver tray loaded with fancy water glasses, she mentally checked out. She went full ghost mode. Slipping past tables packed with dirty politicians, she held her breath until she stepped right into the suffocating, freezing pressure zone, wrapping around Table 4, totally bracing herself for an absolute disaster. 3 absolute tanks in dark suits stood like brick walls, blocking off the table with a heavy vibe of violence. Right in the dead center of it all was Dante. 32 years old, and honestly, way more intimidating in person than in those blurry police photos. Rocking a custom charcoal suit, his dark eyes scanned the room with the terrifying, lazy energy of a tiger waiting to snap. Next to him sat Vanessa Thorne, a toxic heiress wearing way too much red silk, aggressively typing on her phone and totally ignoring the humans nearby. Here is a major life lesson. Building a massive shield of arrogance might make you feel untouchable, but you always figure out way too late just how incredibly empty and totally alone you are inside that shiny, fake fortress. Keeping her head down, Evelyn basically tried to turn invisible while setting out the drinks. Dante completely ignored her existence, tapping one finger on the table in this huge flex of untouchable mob boss energy. But Vanessa? She instantly chose violence. Her voice dripped with pure venom as she started whining about the wait time. Evelyn slapped on a fake customer service smile, whispering an apology as she put the crystal down. Out of nowhere, Vanessa shrieked at her to freeze, jabbing a painted nail at a totally fake smudge on the glass. When Evelyn quietly promised it was clean, Vanessa just lost her mind. It highlights a really sad truth about people. The ones who feel the most pathetic and insecure inside are always the ones screaming the loudest just to get noticed. Going into full panic mode, Evelyn spit out apologies and reached out to take the glass back. Nope. Vanessa violently slapped her hand away, screaming at her to pour the water, while also throwing shade at Dante for just sitting there. Evelyn's hands were shaking out of control. Just as she tilted that heavy pitcher, Vanessa did the absolute unthinkable. She purposely jerked her elbow back, slamming it right into the poor girl's wrist. The pitcher dropped. You and I know how time completely freezes when something terrible happens, right? The ice water missed the mob boss and dumped straight down Vanessa's ridiculously expensive dress. It is a perfect lesson for us. When you go out of your way to ruin someone else, the worst of the karma always splashes right back into your own lap. An absolute screech ripped out of Vanessa's throat. She didn't even sound human anymore. Her face morphed into an ugly mask of pure rage as she jumped up, spitting the worst insults imaginable at the server. Evelyn didn't get half a second to beg before the hit connected. It was a filthy backhand, loaded with a massive diamond ring that made a sickening crack against the girl's cheekbone. The hit swept Evelyn completely off her feet, dropping her hard onto the solid marble floor. The tray smashed down and someone killed the jazz music, leaving the rich snobs gasping in total shock. This proves a heavy life lesson. Unburned anger is a wildfire. It instantly burns down the fake manners of high society to show you the ugly monsters hiding right in front of you. Pure, blinding pain exploded across Evelyn's face, followed by the nasty copper taste of fresh blood. Tears streamed down her cheeks, purely from the raw physical shock of getting clocked. Vanessa towered over her like a furious demon, screaming about ruining her life. Then the spineless floor manager came running over, pale as a ghost. Trying to suck up to the mob money, the absolute coward yelled that Evelyn was fired on the spot. While the poor girl tried pushing herself up to explain, Vanessa cranked her arm back for round two. We have to remember this hard truth in life. Standing by like a total coward when someone is being abused is never neutral. Doing nothing is literally just another way of participating in the violence yourself. Vanessa was hissing about her ruined night as she swung her hand down for the kill shot. Down on the floor, Evelyn just squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the hit. But guys, the hit never landed. A super deep, freezing cold voice sliced right through the crazy drama, and the whole room stopped breathing. You and I have probably figured out by now that the most dangerous person in the room never actually has to yell to get attention. His massive hand locked onto made his move. His massive hand locked onto Vanessa's wrist, freezing that diamond ring an inch from Evelyn's face. He wasn't even straining. But the Harris couldn't move a single muscle. Completely ignoring Vanessa's whining, the Mafia prince just stared down at the floor with those dead, calculating eyes. For the absolute first time all night, the underworld king actually looked at the broken server, crying at his leather shoes. His completely dead eyes scanned Evelyn, zeroing in on her shaking shoulders and that fresh trail of blood leaking down her jaw. Suddenly, something shifted in Dante's expression. Look, it definitely wasn't kindness, and it sure as hell wasn't pity. It was this crazy, dark sense of ownership that made the whole room feel like the oxygen just vanished. Seeing a mob boss stop violence instead of starting it, that is a massive red flag. He casually dropped Vanessa's wrist like she was literal trash. Life teaches us a really twisted lesson in moments like this. You have to be incredibly careful when a dark, dangerous hand reaches out to pull you from the fire. He leaned in and whispered one single command to the crazy heiress. His voice was quiet, but it was so packed with lethal authority it felt like straight poison. The vibe flipped instantly. Vanessa just shut down, sinking back into her chair with a completely humiliated, red face. Then Dante started moving. He stepped around the mess with the smooth energy of a predator checking out its next meal, stopping right in front of Evelyn. The spineless manager was literally shaking out of his shoes, spitting out apologies, and promising to throw the girl outside. Dante just slowly turned his dead eyes toward him. It is a crazy irony of life. The cowards who love punishing weak people are always the very first ones to absolutely shatter when they finally meet a real, undeniable monster. The manager choked on his own spit, crumbling under the mob boss's stare. With icy calmness, Dante casually rewrote reality, telling the room he only saw a clumsy accident followed by an unprovoked attack. The sheer confidence of that lie sent shivers down everyone's spine. Then Dante reached his hand down to the bleeding waitress. "Listen to me. This is exactly how a toxic, dark bond starts." Evelyn stared at his palm, her brain screaming it was a trap. But looking up, she saw no anger, just a scary, obsessive curiosity. We need to remember this life lesson. The absolute worst danger doesn't always come swinging a bat. It shows up disguised as a rescue. Shivering from the shock, the broken waitress slowly surrendered her tiny hand into his. "Look at this, guys. Evelyn is literally fighting for her life as the boss pulls her up. She forces herself to look into his eyes, a crazy mix of storm gray and molten gold." Dante steps into her space, gently tilting her bruised chin. She gasps out loud at his touch, while he stares at the blood dripping down her neck. Her trauma response is instantly activated, and she starts frantically apologizing while trying to clean up the glass. Here is a simple, meaningful life lesson. Sometimes the deepest scar we carry is our instinct to apologize when we are the ones bleeding. Dante is not having it. His voice cracks like a whip, ordering her to drop the pieces. Slowly, this absolute unit of a dark king turns to his date, Vanessa, whose eyes are screaming for an explanation about this mercy. The restaurant lights expose Vanessa losing her mind, disgusted that a boss like Dante would touch a lowly waitress. But Dante does not even blink in her direction. The camera locks onto his hands as he presses a clean cloth against Evelyn's bleeding cheek. "Hold it," he commands. Evelyn is hyperventilating, begging for her job. Dante ignores her panic and just snaps for the check. Vanessa jumps up, whining about her ruined night, but Dante shuts her down with one absolute 0-degree glare. The date is officially canceled. Furious, Vanessa turns all her toxic anger straight onto the bleeding girl. Listen up, because this scene teaches a simple, meaningful life lesson. The people wrapped in the thickest armor of arrogance are almost always the quickest to punish those who cannot fight back. Let us open the scene on Dante Moretti. Today, you and I are going to unpack a masterclass in psychological dominance. Look at the restaurant lighting, cold, sharp, and unforgiving. Vanessa screams about her ruined dress, completely blind to the trap she just walked into. She misses Dante's jaw, tightening as he steps into her space like a towering wall of shadow. His voice drops to a terrifying whisper. He refuses to sit with someone who lacks the discipline to treat the vulnerable with respect. Do not get it twisted. This is no rescue mission. This is a calculated, brutal flex of absolute power. Vanessa threatens to call her daddy, but Dante barely blinks. This gives us a simple, meaningful life lesson. True predators never fear the fire because they are the ones holding the matches. The camera shifts as Dante turns his back on the shrieking woman, dropping a flawless social dismissal. Shadows seem to gather around his shoulders. He locks a dead-eyed gaze onto Marcus, the manager, who is sweating buckets under the chandelier. Marcus wildly stammers about firing the girl. Dante ignores the panic and simply demands the waitress's name. Evelyn Vance. He repeats it, letting the syllables drag across the room like a dark vow. Then comes the ultimate boss move. If she is not employed by dawn, he will buy the building, burn it to ash, and pave over the memory. Marcus instantly crumbles. In the corner, Evelyn stands completely paralyzed, clutching her bloody cloth. This shows us a simple, meaningful life lesson. Weak leadership will always fold the second true power walks into the room. "Get your coat," Dante commands, his low voice slicing straight through the heavy air. In a single breath, he dictates her future. Her shift is over, her cheek needs stitches, and taking the subway is out of the question. Every survival instinct inside Evelyn is screaming at her to run. She whispers that she cannot go with him, her body reading the lethal danger in his posture. Dante gives her a slow, agonizingly sharp smile, a tiny flash of pure hunting amusement. He steps closer, trapping her in the scent of cedar and quiet malice. He drops his voice to an intimate hum, asking if she prefers the cruelty of her manager or the dark unknown with him. This teaches a simple, meaningful life lesson. Your gut intuition is often your only true protector when you are surrounded by hungry wolves. Evelyn's desperate eyes dart across the room. Vanessa is a blur of toxic hostility, and Marcus radiates pure cowardice. You and I have probably both stood at these terrible crossroads, right? That moment you realize all your options are terrible. She looks back at Dante, an apex predator offering the illusion of shelter. Defeated, she breathes a whispered surrender. Dante extends his arm. The second her trembling fingers rest against his suit, her fate is locked in. They walk out together, the shock of the room burning into her spine. She started this shift as a ghost and leaves tethered to a monster. As the street air hits her face, she has no clue her descent is just starting. Here is a simple, meaningful life lesson. Sheer desperation will often force us straight into the arms of our own destruction. The heavy door of the luxury car shuts with a suffocating thud, instantly cutting them off from the chaotic city noise. Make no mistake, Dante Moretti does not help people. He consumes them. "Tell me about the man you are working so hard to save," he murmurs from the shadows. "Tell me about Leo." Evelyn's blood turns straight to ice. She has never spoken her brother's name aloud near this guy. The car cabin is clinically perfect, totally isolated from the world. It smells faintly of expensive leather and cold steel. The psychological cage has officially been locked. The predator has dragged his prey into the absolute dark, and the oxygen is rapidly running out. This brings us to a simple, meaningful life lesson. Our personal secrets are often the only armor we have left, and the powerful will always find a brutal way to steal them. Outside the car, the neon city lights blur into smears against the tinted glass. Evelyn presses her spine flat against the passenger door, desperate to create a tiny illusion of distance. In the agonizing quiet, you can hear the frantic drumming of her heart. "Tell me about Leo." The demand hangs in the freezing air, tearing at her soul worse than the slap she took earlier. Leo is her frail 16-year-old brother fighting leukemia. He is the sole reason she works until her feet bleed, burying her sorrow beneath a stained apron. To have this dark boss casually invade her only reason for living is a massive psychological violation. It proves a painful, simple, meaningful life lesson. Our deepest, purest loves will always be our absolute greatest vulnerabilities in this ruthless world. How? The word fractures as it escapes her trembling lips. She desperately tries to summon the hollow bravery she uses to survive midnight shifts. Dante does not answer right away. Notice the cruel elegance of his delay. He slowly reaches for a crystal decanter, the amber liquid pouring smoothly in the dim light. He takes a drink, intentionally offering zero comfort. Finally, he coldly explains that it is his business to know who serves his meals, especially a girl shaking so violently She can barely hold a tray. Evelyn flushes red with profound shame. She stammers a weak lie, claiming the pressure of the restaurant makes her anxious. But life teaches us an unforgiving, simple, meaningful life lesson here. When you are locked in a room with a true demon, your desperate excuses are nothing more than paper shields ready to burn. No, he corrects her, his deep tone dropping to a devastating caress. In the muted shadows, his eyes look totally devoid of a human soul. He points out that the manager was nervous, but her scent is thick with a metallic tang of pure desperation. The glass hits the console with an echoing clink. Pure horror washes over Evelyn as she realizes this night was never a random coincidence. Dante shifts smoothly, crossing a tailored leg. He calmly confesses to watching her for 3 agonizing weeks. He recites her physical decay like dark poetry. The bruised shadows under her eyes, her dropping weight, the frantic way she checks her broken phone. He has memorized every ounce of her suffering. This teaches a terrifying, simple, meaningful life lesson. We are never truly invisible to the predators, quietly watching us from the dark. Her hand crushes the cracked phone in her pocket, her lifeline to the boy fading in a hospital bed. "You are invasive," she spits. Her crippling terror mutates into a tragic flare of defensive rage. Dante sits there like a statue of unbothered stone. He softly remarks that personal privacy is merely a fairy tale told to keep weak people docile. Then he unleashes the devastating dossier. Evelyn Vance, 24 years old, sole guardian to a dying teen, rotting in a cramped apartment, drowning beneath $80,000 of inescapable medical debt. He drops each fact into the quiet air like a dark judge delivering a death sentence. Her tragic existence is completely laid bare. It reinforces a brutal, simple, meaningful life lesson. Anger is a totally useless weapon when you lack the actual power to back it up. Watch this moment carefully with me. You and I are witnessing the surgical destruction of a human soul. Evelyn's reality is completely shattered. Hot tears spill over her eyelashes, stinging the open wound on her cheek. "What do you want from me?" she sobs, pleading to know if her misery is just a twisted game. Dante's hand slips inside his tailored jacket. Evelyn flinches hard, her body bracing for a blade. Instead, he produces a pristine silk square. He leans forward, his heavy body heat swallowing her trembling frame. But notice the insane detail here. He does not hand the fabric to her. To surrender the silk would be to surrender his total dominance. This teaches a haunting, simple, meaningful life lesson. True control is rarely about physical violence. It is the quiet, terrifying theft of a person's free will. Look at this guy, Dante. He is pressing silk to Evelyn's skin, tracing her cut with this crazy, agonizing precision. We have seen this whole possessive mob boss trope before. But this is a total masterpiece of dark psychology. He whispers that his ex was just a boring kid, but Evelyn? She hits different. She asks why she even matters, her voice shaking like crazy. Dante just says he hates wasted potential and refuses to let a top-tier asset break. Here is a simple life lesson for you. The most dangerous monsters do not just bite you right away. No, they soothe your wounds until you literally forget how to run. Just as she is drowning in his toxic vibe, the car slams on the brakes. "We are here," he snaps, throwing her brain into absolute panic mode. The scene pulls back, and this massive luxury tank of a limousine glides into a super sketchy underground garage. These harsh, glaring lights flood the car, totally wrecking the dark vibe and shocking Evelyn. She is blinking like crazy, reeling from the ultimate mental whiplash. Dante just cuts right through the silence, flexing that absolute boss energy. He demands Dr. Eris, the top plastic surgeon in the entire city. She stammers, swearing it is just a scratch that needs a cheap drugstore bandage. Dante shuts her down instantly. Since she pours his drinks, her face is an extension of his pristine Mafia brand. Honestly, it teaches you a hard truth. Real power never actually yells. It just forces the entire room to bend to its will. The driver rips the door open. You have to watch their faces right here. Dante holds out his hand, and trust me, this is not him being sweet. It is a straight-up command. The exact second her shaking fingers touch his palm, you can practically hear the steel trap snapping shut on her life. A sick wave hits her as she trades being broke for a gorgeous, terrifying cage. It is a wild reminder for all of us. Sometimes we are so desperate to grab the hand, pulling us out of the mud, we totally ignore the predator attached to the arm. The camera follows them, stepping into this insane private clinic. It feels more like a billionaire resort than a hospital. No plastic chairs anywhere. As Dante strides through those glass doors, even the air pressure just bows down to the guy. Just look at how absolute dominance completely warps a room. Two reception nurses snap to attention, their spines going stiff purely on survival instinct. Dr. Aris practically falls out of his office, his fancy suit failing to hide the raw terror sweating out of him. He is panting, totally freaking out that Dante himself might be bleeding. Dante coldly replies that it is not him. He presses his heavy hand onto Evelyn's back, burning like a brand through her cheap uniform. He casually orders the doctor to erase the damage, and boom, she is dragged into an exam room bigger than her whole apartment. It leaves us with a real lesson. True authority does not need to throw punches. It relies entirely on the silent threat of absolute destruction. The camera just hangs in this crazy rich mahogany room that feels sterile but super expensive. For 20 brutal minutes, Evelyn is frozen on this plush table. The doctor treats her like shattered glass, cleaning her cut with absolute precision, whispering these pathetic apologies every time she twitches. But the real nightmare fuel is in the corner. Dante stands there like a statue. He is just watching her shake, totally feeding on her rising panic. This is top-tier villain psychology, guys. We spend our lives running from loud, angry people, but the quiet ones are the real danger. His dead silence literally chokes the oxygen out of the room. It is a calculated emotional weight designed to keep her locked to his side forever. Check out this brutal psychological flex. The doctor shoves a fancy silver tube of healing cream at Evelyn, swearing she will be flawless in 7 days. He nervously asks Dante about the bill, and Dante pulls the most terrifying power move ever. He casually drops a massive financial donation to the pediatric ward, but he puts it entirely under Evelyn's name. She is gasping, totally panicking and begging him not to do it. Dante ignores her completely and marches out. Back in the dark car, her fear turns into this absolutely crushing debt. It shows you a really heavy truth about life. When a toxic person actively buys your gratitude, they are snatching your soul. They literally force you to say thank you for the exact cage they just locked you inside. You have to respect the absolute genius of his trap. He saved her job, got her a master surgeon, and crowned her with a fake halo of charity. But if you grew up struggling, sudden kindness is a massive red flag. Every sweet gesture is just a heavy blade waiting to drop. In a totally defeated whisper, she gives the driver an address in the worst part of Queens. It is the kind of block guys like Dante only read about in crime reports. As the flashy skyline turns into decaying brick, Dante stays completely chill. He gives off the exact same apex predator energy here as he does in his penthouse. They roll up to her spot, and her shame is just suffocating. It is a harsh reality that bringing a billionaire into your mess just makes you feel totally worthless. The whole vibe here is just a brutal clash of two worlds. We are talking a rotting 4-story brick building with peeling paint and a busted front door. Random dudes on the corner literally freeze as this sleek beast of a limousine rolls up. Desperate to escape, Evelyn mutters a quick thanks and goes for the door. But Dante drops a low murmur that absolutely freezes her blood. He turns his head, and this creepy amber streetlight cuts his face in half, making him look like an absolute demon. He says they need to talk about the future. She weakly asks if he means her future. Listen closely, because this happens all the time. Our absolute worst nightmares usually sneak up on us while we are busy stressing over something else. The trap is officially sprung. She is scrambling for an exit, but the doors are locked tight. She promises to work double shifts and stay invisible during his VIP dinners. Dante just shatters her rambling with one word, her name. He drops the cold, hard truth that he does not care about the restaurant. He cares about Leo. His voice is absolute ice as he lists off the nightmare of her life. Her brother Leo needs surgery on Tuesday, and the chemo costs $25,000. Money she definitely does not have. She starts shaking uncontrollably. She had been praying for a miracle, but we really need to understand that miracles rarely show up in tailored suits. The devil, however, is always dressed to kill. She just stares at him, totally stunned that he knows her darkest secrets. Stick with me here, because you and I are about to see the ultimate checkmate. Dante leans into the shadows and drops the craziest plot twist. He already bought the collection agency holding her brother's medical debt. He literally purchased her entire life. While she was pouring drinks, she feels like she is going to throw up. He did not just buy her bills, he weaponized her worst nightmare. She breaks down, crying, screaming she has absolutely nothing to give a guy like him. Dante leans in close, invading her space. The dim light catches his eyes, making him look completely unhinged. He whispers that she has exactly what he wants: total anonymity, crushing desperation, and zero power. Life lesson right here. Your deepest vulnerability is a predator's favorite cache. He basically forces this heavy, expensive card into her shaking hand. No name on it, just 10 silver digits glowing in the dark. He lays out his twisted logic like he is ordering lunch. His last girlfriend made a public scene and embarrassed him. To him, looking weak is the absolute worst crime imaginable. He needs a replacement who totally understands the assignment of staying quiet and obedient. Evelyn is just staring at the card, her brain glitching out from the shock. He tells her a car is picking her up at 9 to sign contracts. Then he drops the ultimate nuke. He will pay for her brother's entire treatment. It is terrifying because the most dangerous deals we make in life are never signed under threat. They are signed when someone offers us our exact prayers. The price tag for this miracle is literally her entire soul. For 1 full year, she is his literal property. She wears what he says, goes where he points, and obeys without asking a single question. She is fighting back nausea as she asks if he just wants a mistress. Dante lets out this dark, villainous laugh. Mistresses cause too much drama, he says. No, he wants her to be his literal bride. Before she can even process that massive bomb, she is standing alone on the filthy sidewalk. The limousine speeds off, its red lights fading into the dirty city smog. She is squeezing that card so hard, her hand bleeds. When you trade your entire soul to save someone you love, the world just keeps turning, leaving you completely alone to pay that absolute nightmare of a price. The city streets are absolute chaos, with heavy trucks rattling the storefront glass. But inside Evelyn's head, total dead silence. The word fiancé tastes like straight poison right now. This is not your typical romance story. This is a hostile takeover of a girl's entire existence. You and I have seen how these underworld bosses operate, right? They calculate the exact amount of pressure needed to break someone. And Dante looked at her exactly like that. Shaking, she pushes into her run-down apartment building, choking on the smell of burnt cabbage and old smoke. Dragging her feet up the stairs, under a busted light bulb, she dreads what is waiting behind door 3B. The lesson here is simple. Sometimes the heaviest doors we are forced to open just lead right back to our own desperate, messy reality. She unlocks the door, and boom, the sound of a violent cough absolutes the thin walls all. Evelyn drops her bag and bolts into the tiny second bedroom. This is where we see her one and only weakness. Her little brother Leo. He is 16, but this disease has completely hollowed him out until he looks like a terrified little kid. His skin is practically see-through, every single vein pulsing. Chimo took his hair, and now the sickness is just chewing up whatever spirit he has left. Gasping for air, he whispers that she is late. Instantly, Evelyn slaps on this bright fake smile, hiding her totally shattered soul. She sits on his bed and lies straight to his face about having a terrible dinner rush. The hardest truth to swallow is this: we always lie the most beautifully to the people we are desperately trying to save. The focus pulls right in on this poor kid. He is pressing her about the tip money, his sunken eyes wide with the kind of panic that belongs to a much older man. He can literally feel the crushing weight of the eviction notices stacked up on the kitchen counter. It is a mental toll, taking him out faster than the sickness. Evelyn does not even blink. She swears she made a ton of cash, but her eyes drift over to the nightstand. An empty pill bottle sits right next to a prescription slip that takes $40 she just does not have. Exhausted, Leo sinks into his pillows, his breathing way too shallow. He whispers that the doctor called today. It is totally gut-wrenching. The lesson here is brutal but real. Sometimes, sheer poverty is a way louder death sentence than the actual disease itself. Leo starts murmuring about hearing their mom talk to the doctor right before she bailed. Evelyn goes completely rigid, breaking under the pressure of a sicko, breaking under the pressure of a sick kid. Now the boy is blurring that old trauma with his current doom. Evelyn asks what the doctor said, and Leo drops the absolute hammer. The hospital wants to move him to hospice care. That word hangs in the room like a heavy blade. Hospice means it is game over. Unable to hold it together for even one more second, Evelyn runs into the kitchen. She cranks the sink faucet up to maximum volume, desperate to drown out the sound of her own ugly crying. The lesson here is stark. True heartbreak is rarely quiet. It is just the frantic noise we make trying to hide our total collapse from the people we cherish the most. $80,000. That is the literal price tag slapped onto a little boy's ability to breathe. She is staring at the gross, rotting kitchen counter, totally drowning in aggressive medical debts. Slowly, her shaking fingers uncurl, revealing a heavy black card catching the ugly fluorescent light. Those silver numbers shine like a steel trap. Dante Moretti is absolutely no hero. He is an apex predator who treats human lives like loose change. Calling him is basically signing her soul over to the devil. But right then, a horrific cough rips from the bedroom, slicing straight through her hesitation. She makes the call, accepting her massive downfall. Here is a profound truth we all have to face eventually. When the people we love are out of time, strict morality becomes a luxury we can no longer afford to keep. It is 1 a.m, and the silence breaks the second she dials those silver numbers. Dante picks up on ring 1, his voice totally empty of human warmth. This guy was literally just waiting, knowing she would crack. Evelyn whispers her total surrender. He does not even brag. He just has that chilling satisfaction of a hunter watching the cage lock into place. Stick with me, because this is where the drama gets locked in. The craziest deals do not come from greed. They come from pure, terrified love. He coldly tells her to pack a single bag, swearing Leo will be in a top-tier medical wing by noon. Boom. Transaction complete. Evelyn is basically erasing her own existence. The lesson here is rough. Love does not always save the day. Sometimes it is the exact tool used to lock in our own absolute ruin. Let us really look at how this scene is set up. The second the phone clicks off, Evelyn drops right onto the nasty kitchen floor. She just sold her entire life to the absolute worst monster in the city. But the drive to protect your own is wild. She is fully willing to let this demon drag her down if it buys her brother's birthday. That is the crazy thing about sacrifice. We will literally walk into a fire for the people we care about. Fast forward to 9 in the morning and reality hits hard. There is no fancy limo waiting. A black armored tank of a car sits at the curb. Silas, a scarred enforcer built like a brick wall, tosses her bag into the trunk. He hits her with 2 freezing words. Get in. The lesson here hits hard. True sacrifice always kicks off by violently ripping away your own free will. The camera sweeps across the empty bedroom. Leo was already gone, swooped up at dawn by a private medical squad Dante paid for. Evelyn had hugged the kid tight, choking out a massive lie about landing a high-paying job. The words basically burned her throat. But honestly, the purest acts of love usually require the darkest lies just to keep our fragile people safe. The drive into Manhattan is thick with suffocating silence. Silas grips the steering wheel, aggressively running normal cars off the road like there are just bugs on the windshield. They finally pull up to Moretti Tower. It is this terrifying, massive spike of black glass and steel tearing into the sky like a jagged weapon. The lesson is undeniable. Absolute wealth is very often just raw violence wrapped up in towering, insanely expensive architecture. This building is a literal fortress designed to separate the sharks from the minnows. Silas marches her to a hidden steel elevator, scanning his eyeball to get the doors open. The elevator shoots up so fast her ears pop, a nasty reminder that she is leaving the regular human world behind. The doors open into a freezing penthouse sanctuary. Guys who think they are gods always build their bases in the clouds. Massive windows give a dictatorial view of the tiny city below. The room is aggressively empty, just sharp chrome, black leather, and air conditioning blasting so hard Evelyn is shaking in her cheap sweater. Sitting totally frozen behind a massive black stone desk is Dante. We learn a serious truth right here. Putting maximum distance between yourself and regular humanity is step 1 for absolute, unchecked cruelty. Check out the crazy power dynamics happening right now. Dante is deep into a phone call, rattling off angry Italian and totally ignoring her existence. He literally just raises one finger and points at an empty chair. Sit. Evelyn drops into the freezing leather, hiding her shaking hands. This is exactly how you break somebody. You make them feel smaller than dirt. Hanging up the phone without even looking at her, he slides a massive stack of papers across the desk. It is a straight-up contract to become his fake fiancée. He asks if she brought a lawyer to check the terms, but his voice is dripping with sarcasm. It is a massive flex. He knows she is broke and totally trapped. The lesson here is wild. True power does not just want to beat you down. It actually wants you to grab a pen and willingly sign the paperwork agreeing to your own destruction. The vibe of the room changes as he stands up, walking around the desk to tower over her. It is pure, primal intimidation. Evelyn picks up the papers, feeling sick to her stomach as she reads the rules of her new prison. She has to play the role of the obsessed perfect fiancé. Without a single mistake, total loyalty is required. If she even breathes next to another guy, she needs his permission first. People always wonder how victims end up trapped, but here is the ugly reality. total control is super easy to hide behind the legal ink of a contract. When she sees the insane penalties for breaking the rules, the blood completely leaves her face. Dante shrugs off her panic like it is standard business. The lesson here is simple. Evil rarely shows up wearing a monster mask. It wears a custom suit and calls itself a legally binding agreement. The room temperature somehow drops another 10 degrees as he drops the corporate act. He makes it crystal clear that if she crosses him, if she talks to the press, or even looks at another man, legal ruin would be a blessing. You can practically feel the threat of physical violence hanging in the air. When Evelyn chokes back a sob and whispers that he owns her, he corrects her with zero emotion, only for 12 months. Then he totally weaponizes her love for Leo, listing off the insanely expensive medical treatments he just bought. The brutal surgeries, the top-tier chemo. By saving her brother, he is disguising his tyranny as some kind of holy salvation. Leaning in close enough for her to smell his expensive cologne, he drops the final hammer. She is his property now. The ultimate lesson is loud and clear. The purest love can always be bought and chained by those with enough cash. Let's pause and look at the totally twisted psychology playing out right here. Evelyn finds a tiny ounce of buried guts and actually demands to know why a billionaire wouldn't just hire some actress instead of snatching up a broke waitress. Bro, his reaction is pure, terrifying megalomania. He reaches out, his freezing fingers violently grabbing her chin, forcing her face into the harsh light while brushing over a fading purple bruise. He whispers that paid professionals only pretend. He needs her real, raw terror and bleeding hatred to make his sick performance absolutely flawless. Listen to me, because here is a simple truth we all need to remember. The absolute worst monsters in this world do not want your love. They just want to eat your fear. We have all seen how crazy money can be used as a literal weapon. To truly get a read on a guy like Dante, just watch the precise, terrifying way he claims what he thinks is his. He does not ask for her trembling hand. He straight up seizes it. He pulls out this absurdly heavy, emerald-cut diamond that catches the room's light like a busted mirror. In his dark world of total control, giant, flashy gifts are never actually about romance. They are beautiful, crushing shackles meant to hold you down. He slides that freezing metal onto her finger, physically yanking her into his space to lock in his dominance. Never forget this basic rule of life, guys. Real love will never start by demanding your total, absolute submission. He pulls her tight against his chest and whispers rule number 1 right into her ear. The camera zooms right in on her terrified face as he builds this invisible prison around her. They are never to be seen apart in public, he commands, quickly dropping rule number 2. She is never to question his absolute authority. He brushes his cold lips against her ear, completely wiping away who she used to be. She is no longer Evelyn the struggling waitress. She is now Evelyn Moretti, a massive walking target for the mob. By warning her that running away means a brutal death by his rivals, he sets himself up as both her captor and her only way out. Never let anyone convince you that a locked cage is the only safe place to survive in this crazy life. "Welcome, the steel of family," he murmurs. Out of nowhere, the steel elevator dings. "Dante, we have a massive problem." The heavy doors fly open, and a frantic guy in a blood-soaked shirt bursts into the dimly lit room, yelling about a rival strike on a Bronx warehouse. The camera pushes in real close on Dante, and his physical control is just terrifying. Not a single muscle twitches. His face is like carved marble. But the room immediately drops 10 degrees. Instead of even looking at the bleeding guy, his dark eyes stay obsessively locked on Evelyn. With this agonizing calmness, he calls for his driver, Silas. Look at his cold detachment as he orders his new bride locked in the master bedroom under heavy guard, offering zero comfort. It teaches us a pretty simple truth. A man's true nature is never found when things are quiet, but in the freezing clarity of absolute chaos. Only then does he drop her hand. Dante stares out the high windows, treating the city below like a doomed chessboard. The war I told you about, whisper, fixing his cuffs with absolute, terrifying calm. It just started. The drive to his estate is a total masterclass in sensory deprivation. Silas drives the armored tank of a car through the pitch-black night in dead silence. In the back, the camera sits on Evelyn's shaking fingers as she twists that heavy diamond ring digging into her skin. She tries to make sense of this nightmare, telling herself that trading her freedom for her brother's life was a noble move. But the tragedy of sacrifice teaches us a really harsh lesson. We gladly jump into the fire to save someone else, only to realize way too late the devastating cost to our own soul. Pure dread finally sinks in. As the armored car pushes north into the foggy Hudson Valley, the isolation gets totally insane. Normal, suburban lights completely fade into pitch-black woods. They roll up to these massive iron gates, 20 feet high and covered in lethal spikes. After a cold biometric scan, the iron groans open like a star's beast. "Where are we?" Evelyn whispers, her tiny voice swallowed by the giant car. Silas just grunts that it is the fortress. Coming out of the freezing fog, a huge gray stone mansion rises up like a Gothic church with zero mercy. The building itself is a weapon meant to crush your spirit. There is a deep lesson hiding in this brutal setup, guys. The thicker the walls a person builds to keep the outside world away, the more terrified they are of losing control on the inside. Stick with me here, because we need to look closely at this bleak place dragging her in. Despite the fancy stone towers, the estate has absolutely zero warmth. Blinding security lights slice through the fog, showing armed guards marching around with assault rifles and huge dogs pulling on tight leashes. Silas barks at her to get inside, saying, "The boss refuses to leave her exposed," which is a huge red flag of toxic resource guarding. As Evelyn steps out, the freezing air burns her lungs. Waiting by the giant oak doors is an older woman, staring at her like she is just incoming inventory. This points to a tragic truth about feeling trapped. The most dangerous prisons in our world are often perfectly disguised as beautiful palaces meant to crush your spirit early. Martha, the head housekeeper, stands there like the grim warden of this dark prison. Dressed in a strict black gown, she coldly wants his bride taken straight to the master suite. Evelyn stammers, begging for just a normal guest room, holding on to any fading hope of boundaries. From the top of the giant staircase, Martha looks down with this chilling mix of pity and absolute stone coldness. "There are no guests here," she states, flatly. "You sleep where he sleeps. That is the rule." Evelyn's heart hammers in her chest as the crushing reality of her complete loss of freedom hits her. Walking past old paintings of violent mobsters, a heavy life lesson echoes in the hall. When you agree to play a role in a monster's story, you give up the right to write your own ending. The nightmare gets completely real when Martha walks Evelyn through these massive oak bedroom doors. The warden gives her the rules with totally cold precision. Stay inside, your food will be brought up, and stepping out triggers an automatic security lockdown. Evelyn lets out a shaky breath as the heavy deadbolt line slides into place with a loud mechanical click. She is officially locked in. The camera pans slow as she looks around her beautiful new cage, where every single detail is built just to intimidate her. A huge stone fireplace casts violent shadows over the heavy wood furniture and black silk sheets. This whole scene teaches us a really bitter lesson about life. The darkest cells we ever find ourselves in are often wrapped in pure luxury, built just to force us into total vulnerability. The smells in that master bedroom are totally overwhelming. Sharp cedar, cold rain, and expensive tobacco fill the air, perfectly locking in Dante's invisible control over her senses. Pressing her hand against the freezing window, Evelyn watches guards walking the foggy property line. She finally gets her exact role in this messed-up tragedy. She is just a hostage waiting in the dark for the predator to come home. She leaves her fancy tray of food completely untouched, pulling off a quiet, desperate little rebellion. Hugging her knees to her chest, she waits. A really powerful life lesson shows up here. True powerlessness is measured in the silent hours we spend waiting for the bad things to happen. At exactly 2 a.m, the heavy deadbolt finally clicks open. Every single inch of Dante's massive frame screams that he just walked out of a brutal war zone. His dark sleeves are rolled up, and his hair is stuck to his forehead with sweat. But your eyes go straight to the horror show on his arm. A huge bloodstain is soaking right through a messy bandage, perfectly matching his busted-up knuckles. He stops in the doorway, breathing heavy, vibrating with the crazy energy of a wolf fresh off a hunt. "You are awake," he rasps, sounding totally wrecked. "You are bleeding," Evelyn whispers, her body moving on its own toward this dangerous man. This is such a beautifully tragic twist. We learn a hard life lesson right here. In moments of pure stress, our hearts often betray us, falling back into the caring habits that ultimately seal our dark fate. Then it is nothing, Dante growls, trying to push past her. Evelyn reacts super fast. That is not a scratch. It is soaking right through. He completely freezes, his dark eyes wide open with the toxic adrenaline of recent violence. "And what do you care?" he snarls, his wild paranoia bleeding out. "You got what you wanted. Leo is safe. Go to sleep." As those words drop, his balance fails and his massive body sways. Evelyn crosses the room and grabs his good arm. The ruthless boss flinches, his muscles locking like solid steel under her hands. But he actually lets her touch him. "Sit down," she orders. A beautiful life pop up here. When we instinctively step up to heal broken people, we forget our own deepest fears. Let us pause right here, you and I, because this standoff is wild. Evelyn calmly claims she changed her brother's dressings for 2 years, knowing exactly what to do. Dante scans her face like a hawk, searching for a trap, but finds nothing. He drops onto the mattress, hiding a wince. Evelyn grabs the med kit and kneels right between his knees. Talk about the danger zone. She warns him it will sting, pulling back the bloody gauze to reveal a crazy, jagged wound. She pours on burning antiseptic, and Dante does not even flinch. He just locks those dark, obsessive eyes totally on her face. It leaves us with a solid lesson. The deepest wounds a person carries are rarely the physical ones bleeding out, but the invisible scars hiding behind a cold, empty stare. Look at how this mafia boss studies her right now. He tracks every micro-expression on her face, asking why she is even helping him. His usual paranoia is totally gone, replaced by a twisted fascination. He points out that most people would let him bleed out on the floor. Evelyn refuses to look at him. She stays super detached, muttering that she just does not want his blood ruining the expensive silk sheets. That savage comeback forces a rough laugh out of the kingpin. It is a massive crack in his scary armor. But the second she tries to back away, his hand shoots out and locks around her wrist like a steel trap. It hits us with a harsh but real truth. Offering a tiny bit of kindness to a wild beast will never actually tame him. It just teaches the monster exactly how much he hungers for you. You can feel all the oxygen just vanish from the room in this scene. Evelyn has zero boundaries left right now. The boss pulls her flush against his chest, trapping her so tight she can feel the insane heat radiating off him. He calls her a strange creature, while his thumb presses right against her in racing pulse. He is literally tracking her terror in real time. She is panicking, whispering that she is just doing what their contract says. But Dante pulls a total villain move. He drops his gaze to her trembling lips to scramble her brain, and lowers his voice to a lethal whisper. He asks if she knows why they are locked in this room tonight. It reveals a crazy reality we all face eventually. The terrifying monsters we try so hard to run away from are sometimes the very same walls protecting us from a much darker evil. He drops the heaviest plot twist right here. "There is a traitor," he whispers, and someone inside his circle leaked their coordinates. A shiver completely rips through Evelyn. Dante leans all the way in, letting his shadow swallow her up. He cannot even trust his own elite guards right now. He stands to his terrifying height and tells her she is the only person he knows is clean. Why? Because she despises his Mafia world, and because he holds the ultimate leverage over her brother. He snaps off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness, lit only by the creepy red embers of the fireplace. It highlights a terrifying reality we all have to learn. The absolute strongest cages in this world are never built out of heavy iron bars, but from the desperate, reckless love we hold for our own family. Then he orders her to get in the bed. Pure panic flashes across her face. She tries to use their agreement against him. The contract says she follows instantly. The contract says she follows his orders. Dante strips his ruined shirt, and the firelight catches a chest completely covered in violent scars. He mutters that he desperately needs sleep, and if an assassin breaches the room, he needs to know exactly where she is. He drops onto the mattress, sliding a heavy pistol under his pillow, like it is perfectly normal. He tells her he will not hurt her, but she has to sleep there as his alibi. She stands frozen, totally trapped in his dark gravity. It is a bitter reality we all face. Sometimes, pure survival forces us to surrender our control to the exact same storm we are trying to outrun. Let us look at this specific frame together, guys, because the artwork is insane. We are watching a slow tragedy that totally mirrors the dark history of the old boss. Dante is operating on that exact same twisted wavelength. The camera lingers on Evelyn as it hits her that the true danger is breathing heavily right next to her spine. She is lying there so rigid, practically fighting off Stockholm Syndrome in real time. The monster whispers a casual good night in the dark, and she is dead silent. But here is the crazy part she does not even know. Out in the quiet hallway, a shadow is already creeping up to their door. The traitor is inside the house. Dante just started a lethal chess match, and Evelyn is nothing but helpless bait. It serves as a grim reminder. The most dangerous betrayals always happen right under our own roofs. You and I are at the edge of our seats, waiting to see who breaks first. The human mind is incredibly fragile when locked in a room with pure terror, and Evelyn is teetering right on the edge of emotional collapse. Will she hold on to her sanity, or will this crazy trauma bond wipe out her survival instincts? If you are as hyped about this Mafia drama as I am, hit that like button and subscribe so we can keep unraveling the story. We are heading straight into the next phase of his sick manipulation. The shadows are moving, the traitor is closing in, and this crash high is going to be massive. Tell me below, is he actually protecting her? Or is she just a human shield? It leaves us with a haunting thought. Sometimes the very people who promise to keep us safe are exactly who we need, saving from the most.